Another day, another dollar. What wonders has the postman brought me today? A Retina IIa. Look at this one. Isn't it pretty? Nose ice bumps. Full paint. Don't see many like that. What's its main problems? Well, the front doesn't lock up correctly. This button here is not all the way along to the slot, you'll notice. And the front standard isn't square with the front of the camera. I checked this. There's about 1 millimeter's difference between this end and this end. So the lens isn't square with the film plane. That's annoying. What else? Shutter doesn't fire. I'm not even sure it's cocking correctly. The shutter release button doesn't really move down very far. So the shutter is most definitely a problem. The out of square lens mount here, front standard, that indicates that the struts are bent. What about the state of the lens? A little bit dirty, it's a bit hard to say. Those shutter blades are certainly quite oily. I think I better take it apart. To gather together my containers, and we'll start with the top of the camera. And I will start with the rewind knob, I think. Pull that off. Oh, this is quite sparkly. Very clean. Sadly, very clean is not what I normally see. Oh, that's tight. I'm going to have to put a pair of pliers on that. That's it. I'm sorting the pieces into 2 containers. One for cleaning manually and one for cleaning in the ultrasonic cleaner. And the pieces for cleaning manually are anything that's got paint on it, because the ultrasonic cleaner is very good at removing that, especially if you don't want it to. Okay, the top cover, 2 screws, one at each end of the top cover. I wonder whether I'll get any surprises today, or whether the faults I've seen are all that really exist. That top cover is reasonably clean. Spring over there. I'll check the shutter release to see if there's a spacer washer down in there, which sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. It doesn't appear to be. That's good. There's no spacer washer, there's nothing for me to lose. The rangefinder next. I can even see through that. Okay, this film advance. I'll take that spacer off there, have that gear off there, let that whiz round, and I can get at the screw head here. Was that loose? It was. That would have caused trouble sooner or later. Let's pop this down and lift that spring off to release the tension. This piece comes off. What have we got? 3 screws. You can only see 2 of them at the moment. Where's the other one? Cocking rack and that piece. Oh, there's the other screw sitting on top of the camera body. This arm can come out. This is in remarkably good order. Stuff that is normally awkward to get off and a little bit stiff because things are a little bit bent is coming off very easily. It's like the camera has only seen a small number of films in its time and it was used very carefully. A little bit of grit here, not much. Take the rewind off too. I know there's something at the bottom of the camera that is going to require some work. That's because the surround from around the tripod socket is missing and the screws are sheared off. Take those bits apart. Where did that other screw go? I could have sworn I heard that video camera make a peep sound then. Usually when the video camera is speaking to me it's not to tell me anything good. A film chip. Here's a film chip. They're very good at jamming things up if they get into an inconvenient place. There's no indication that's happened here. At the top of the camera, I'm done. At the base of the camera, well, let's start on this. First thing I've got to do is peel up the leather. This has got a transfer or something on there of the, I know it's not the owner's name, but it is very likely a family member's name. I'll see if I can lift the leather without damaging that. I may or may not be able to do that. Leather is a little bit more forgiving than Leatherette. getting a bit difficult getting around that, so I'm going to remove this tripod socket to give me better angle of attack with my scalpel. I'm curling the leather back. I'm not folding it back, I'm curling it up so it's got quite the biggest radius I can achieve on that edge. That needs to come out, that's good. That gives me better angle of attack here, because I can see that that scalpel is not getting right down to the metal. Okay. I'll remove the rewind at this point for the same reason, to give me better angle of attack with my scalpel. So I need to remove that surround from there. The slot in these screws is quite small. These are brass screws. Usually covered in green sponge. Yeah, covered in green sponge today. Right, I want that rewind. That rewind button off there next. Oh, that's tight. Nothing obvious there. It's not like it looks. There's no obvious corrosion or anything. It's very tight on the thread. Okay, back to this. I've got to get the leather back at least as far as this point so that I can get to the screw that holds the struts into the body, but really I want to get the leather back right to this point, because otherwise I'll end up with an obvious mark in it, a crease line. Shouldn't have done that. That transfer label there is cracked slightly. I'll moisten that once I've got the leather glued back in place. When I'm finished, it may improve that. The leather's just too well stuck here. I'm just not. Normally what I'd do at this stage is probably roll it back, peel it back, but if I roll it back this thing's going to crack up completely. Yes, might not be going to survive. Yeah, it's not flexible enough. It's not enjoying this. Right, that's far enough. By getting it peeled back this far, it means that any obvious crease or mark there from the leather having been removed and put back will be right down at the end there where it's not obvious. Okay, so the spring on the catch for the rewind, I've just released the tension there. Let's see if we can get this screw out. The spring I'll put in the other container with all the small pieces, all the pieces that aren't going through the cleaner. 3 screws hold the shaft in here, or hold the bush that holds the shaft. All this is very clean in here. It'd be interesting to know more about the history of this camera. Typically a camera that's in very good order means it's been out of service for a long time. I'm going to remove the hinge pin screw from the bottom of the door there. And cameras that have been out of service for a long time, usually there's a very good reason for that. Usually it means that they were seriously broken and therefore particularly useless. Or possibly, now this is interesting, this door is flopping about on here. Now that's a good sign that there's been trouble in the past. It doesn't have its cartridge paper washers top or bottom there either. That's a good sign to me that that door has quite possibly come adrift from the slots. We know the struts are bent. It points to the camera having been dropped. There are no scars on here I can see, which points to it having been dropped perhaps onto the carpet. So the sprocket shaft can come out now. Of course we've got a single screw here, drives the sprocket from the sprocket shaft. Take the sprocket out. You can take out the take-up spool, and that's very clean, isn't it? I mean, it's not covered in your usual rash of greasy fingerprints. The pressure plate here looks good. You know, it's, if somebody was to tell me the camera had never been used, I'd be hard pressed to find signs of use. Shutter and lens assembly next, I think. Just wiping my surface here, get an idea of what I'm feeling. There's a bit of sparkle there, but a sparkle is usually sand. So there's a little bit of grit about. Right, shutter and lens assembly. I'll pop that to one side for later attention. Carry on with the dismantling the body. We can take that shroud off there from the gear at the front of the camera. The screws can go through the cleaner. This can't, because that nice green M and X will just disappear. Here's the gear and the guide bush for it. And we need to remove this. This piece here on the inner helical is coupled to this arm, and this arm has a screw on the top, and that screw couples to the rangefinder. This is all flopping around. It's those struts need a little bit of attention. Remove those two screws, remove this screw, what I'm checking this for is to make sure that this is flat across the front in this direction. It's pretty good. This has got a bit of a roll to the back on it. I'll check that once it's back in the camera. That can have some bearing on how the rangefinder functions if that's bent. So here I've got to mark this so that I can get everything back where it's supposed to be when I put it back together. Now I can see two marks here on the outer helical and two marks on the inner helical, which probably line up when those front surfaces are level. Now somebody else has made those marks, possibly it was even done during assembly. I'm going to scribe some lines across here so that I have got the correct, so I know the correct alignment of the lens, the scale ring, focus scale ring and the outer helical, and I'll do that here. Typically I'll put two at the bottom, one at the top. Now the inner and outer helicals are not dead level at that point. That's at the infinity position. I can't move them any further back. So I will remove the scale ring, then get my inner and outer helical level and check the marks that are on there. If they do indeed represent the point at which those surfaces are level, I can leave them there. Let's see what happens. With those alignment marks lined up, I'll check what that front surface looks like. The inner helical is slightly higher at that point. That's pretty close. Yeah, I'm satisfied with that. With those surfaces aligned, the inner and outer helical, when they're dead flat with each other at the front, these alignment marks, the original ones, they are pretty much in close alignment, certainly good enough that I can't mistake that. So that's good. 4 screws here, the black ones, hold the bellows to the back of the front standard. Now these screw heads are not in stunning condition. It means that whenever this was assembled, somebody had a bad screwdriver. This one here, I'm not sure I can get into that. Might collapse this so I can put some pressure on that. That screw's going to give me some trouble. I can't even see the slot. Oh, it is turning. Yeah, that screw head's pretty chewed up. The bellows have fallen back into the body. That's good. So 4 screws here hold the lens assembly to the front standard, and the focus assembly to the front standard. Now these screws are loose. That means that the lens and shutter assembly would have been slightly loose on the front of the camera. Probably enough to affect focus. The focus mount here, let's have this apart. There are 6 screws that hold this retainer in place, and the retainer keeps all this together. Keeps the outer helical in the mount and stops the outer helical from floating, so that as it's rotating, the only forward and backward motion is the inner helical. Pop that plate and those screws in there for cleaning. Now, screws here that went through to retain the bellows. It's the last 2 of them. Now one of them of course was quite damaged, and I'll find a replacement for that. Just